Commence primary ignition.
I'm just not the hero type, clearly.
What a piece of junk.
Enterprise, this is the captain.
I got a bad feeling about this.
It's all part of the plan.
Engage.
Welcome back to Podcast 2 for 1. I'm your host, Donovan Thompson, with my co-host,
Daniel Wingfield.
And today is episode 154 of Podcast 2 for 1, youtube.com/2for1 studios, the best place to consume the content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you're up to date on all future episodes of Podcast 2 for 1. And if you didn't know, let's be honest, you probably didn't. We are sponsored by Kapow Comics, located at 4047 East Kill Avenue in Charlotte, Arkansas, that they have comic books, collectibles, graphic novels, and of course, special guest appearances throughout the year. Daniel, it's episode 154, and we're talking episode 2 of season 3 of The Mandalorian, the show that started it all for us. Last week we talked about episode 1 of season 3, and I think we had some fun. We had some reservations, but I think we were very curious as to where they were going to go with the show, what was going to happen, and just the arc of this season. So I want you to go ahead and get into it. Tell me your initial thoughts, and let's rock and roll.
I really like this episode. In fact, I think it did a lot of the things that episode 1 didn't do for me, which was get into the story, get into the plot, get into kind of a fast-paced just rhythm. And I think this episode, for one, it moved very quick. You know, I'll be honest, when we opened on Tatooine, I groaned. I was like, oh no, oh no. And then we were there for like all of 4 minutes and we left and I was like, thank you. You know what I mean? But yeah, I loved the Mines of Mandalore. I loved getting to see like this post-apocalyptic Mandalore. And we dive right in, like within like 10 minutes, they're like on the ground and walking in and exploring this place. I thought I really liked the creature design for this episode, particularly like the General Grievous-y looking robot-y alien thing. He was awesome.
He was awesome.
And then, I just thought, the pacing was good. Like, we were treated to like lots of just like, things happening when we didn't think they were. I really liked the scene with Mando, like bathing and then her having to go and save him. And then seeing, I assume that is like that creature in the water was like that creature she mentioned when they said it was like, this place was used to be like this ancient creature's, home. And so, so I really like where it left it, where it kind of like left it where you feel like Bo-Katan's maybe starting to believe too, maybe she's starting to like, believe in maybe the ways of Mandalore, or maybe she's starting to see things here that will make her want to like recommit to the Mandalorian way or something. I don't know. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was 45 minutes of story and plot and action. And I thought that's what I was hoping episode 1 was, but at least we got it in episode 2.
Yeah, I mean, disclaimer, I like almost not everything, but like, it's Mandalorian, it's Star Wars. Like it always does enough where I'm like, that's good, it's great, I'm enjoying it. I've very rarely had just like downright just disdain for anything in Mandalorian ever. I thought it was a great episode. I enjoyed it. I love the action. I love the creature design. Like you said, the General Grievous got the end. Like I thought, I'm like, man, at first I kind of felt like he was not in Star Wars, but I was like, well, this reminds me of like the prequel area. Kind of like you said, General Grievous and kind of that kind of, but like even like more Sith-like and more like gross. And I was like,
more
this is awesome.
Creature-like, more like monstery-like than like intelligent. Yeah.
And I really like that a lot. A few things. I mean, it feels like there's a couple of things that kind of still bother me. It's like he's going to get R5 on Tatooine, which also that girl, the lady on Tatooine, I've never been a fan of hers. She's just, I don't know what they see in her performance or why they think that's a fun
She's popular
performance.
With like kids. I think that's what it is.
I guess so, but like every time I see her, every time she speaks, I cringe a little. Like I'm like, oh, like it's just not serious at all and feels totally out of place.
Yeah, she's just like a Sesame Street character.
100%. Like, yeah, she's Mr. Rogers or something. And I thought it was interesting that, like this whole thing of episode 1 was getting a new droid. We get R5 in the first 5 minutes. It's like, oh, you could just pressurize your helmet, like they walk around on Mandalore.
Sure.
Like I know he needs to know like is the atmosphere breathable, but it just kind of feels
Also,
like
sorry, mentioning the droid, was there just not a giant plot hole that like the droid disappears, Mando goes to follow him, Mando gets captured, Baby Yoda goes, and then when Baby Yoda runs back to the ship, R5's already back at the ship, just like chilling in the ship. Did he
really
just
I forgot about R5 honestly after he
because he like
disappears.
because he disappears and then Mando goes to follow him, then Mando disappears, then
That's
Baby
right,
Yoda
because
goes to
Baby
follow
Yoda's
him.
like he's like, look at this star map, which was cute. Like, take me there. Like that was
Exactly.
cute.
But where
Yeah,
did
you're right.
he got captured? I thought that just felt like a
Yeah, or not even captured, but I guess. I mean, does R5 even tell him the air is breathable, or I can't
no.
remember. Yeah,
He doesn't. Well, he has his helmet. He doesn't test if the air is breathable. He just has the helmet on the whole time.
so like it all seems pointless to me. It just seems like it was almost
Yeah.
there just to have Baby Yoda have somebody to take him to Bo-Katan. Like that whole thing, episode one was just so we could have a way that Baby Yoda could do. But that's the thing. That's an easy like. Mando could have said, "Here's a return button to like other previous places we've been at," and Baby Yoda presses it when he gets back in the cockpit. I mean, like
Yeah.
there's 1,000 things you could have done that to save us time in episode one and partly in episode two. Like the whole opening of the Tatooine thing. You know, like again, that stuff like that still kind of starting to bother me a little bit. But
I get it.
you know, and it is kind of interesting, like, you know, they're clearly showing Bo-Katan as a better Mandalorian than he is almost, because like he goes down there, at least she's definitely better with the Darksaber. He goes down there, does the same thing. He's like always caught off guard by these in this season, he's caught off guard by these minions. You know, the other guy seems pretty formidable. And Bo-Katan's coming into this knowing something's happened, clearly. But like we're repeating the same beats, but the purpose of that narratively, I think, is just to show how more capable Bo-Katan is. Which makes me almost believe that she's going like they're setting her up to be like she is the rightful, you know, owner of the Darksaber, which
Well, Mando said he didn't want it either.
no, I get that. And there's
So-
tons of and this is the valid part of fandom. I think the fandom would agree against me. Totally think like all of fandom would be like, yeah, Bo-Katan should get the Darksaber. I don't. I think Mandalorian's way cooler than her. So I want Mandalorian to have the Darksaber. So it's like I want Mandalorian to become the coolest version of himself. And to me, that's someone who, you know, is in this cult, learns the cult's not the greatest because it makes him devoid of emotion, which, as Star Wars tells us, is good. That's like part of the thesis of this universe, right? And then, you know, him become the reluctant leader. Like, I think that's a cool arc. But it seems like you said, you know, her seeing the beast, which is also odd that like this is the first time in thousands of years that the beast is seen and like her family's royalty and like none of them knew that the beast was down there. But like now, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. There's just some interesting things there. Like, why does, you know, it feels like you're telling, like, she bathed in the waters and why did the beast pull down Mando? And obviously it's plot. Like, this is like,
Yeah.
we're telling this story because this is happening at the perfect time in the perfect place with the perfect people. I get that. But it's kind of like, I don't know. It feels a little manufactured in a way to me. But it's interesting. I mean, I find it kind of the totally opposite of what I thought was going to happen this season. Like Bo-Katan may learn the way, you know, like, I don't know. That's weird. That's not, I mean,
yeah, I mean, you're right in saying I have no, because I really don't know where the season's going to go at this point. At this point, he's accomplished the mission that he set out at the beginning of the season with, right? He's bathed in the waters.
I was very happy that we already got there. I was like, oh, good. The season's not about this. This is not the show this year. I'm glad. Like,
me too. But you're right. It kind of like, I mean, we know, I mean, we unofficially knew this was like this season was about retaking Mandalore, right? Like, wasn't that kind of like,
we knew that. Yeah.
Like just from like press and stuff. And so I think, yeah, I mean, I'm excited because I feel like this is still a season that presents a lot of interesting lore possibilities, I think.
Yes, I agree.
And who knows who else is going to show up, you know, kind of thing. And so that's exciting. But I think, yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying. And I think you are right. There are some ways that it just feels like it's still not always using its time in the way I would hope it would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think this episode, it did give me hope that it like resolved some of what I felt like were uninteresting ideas in the first episode quickly. it did still have some cool moments. You know what I mean? And
100%. I
the
mean,
battle, her
her
battling the
fight
little creature
scene,
was
I
really
think
cool.
even Baby Yoda escaping. I mean, like, don't get me wrong. It sounds like I don't like the episode or I'm complaining about it. I'm nitpicking because I think the show is like a 9 out of 10. Like Star Wars has always been this serial where like things are drawn out. Like there's set pieces that happen
Right.
that don't have much narrative importance, but they're like it's like moments in time that make up this smaller story. That's kind of Star Wars, right? And I get that. I can take the tropes with that, but I think the show is still a 9 out of 10, but I can see that it could be a 10 out of 10. You know what I'm saying? Like that's
Sure.
and the show has always been this way. It's always been like a 9 or 10 out of 10 the whole time for me. And I just don't want wasted real estate. You know, you waited two and a half
Sure.
years for this. But to your point, I think I like this episode better than the first episode. Just because exactly for what you're saying is like we kind of accomplished what we thought the mission of this season was. I was almost convinced it's like, man, this whole season will be him trying to get down those damn waters. You know, like
Sure.
I was really afraid of that, and which they could have made a great story just doing that. Like, there's a way of doing that, like having a lot of character growth and like cool things that happen while that's happening.
Yeah.
But I like that the show kind of did that earlier. I think that now, like, what's going to happen next? Like, is he going to go back to the tribe and like I'm a Mandalore now and Bo-Katan
I
going to
doubt
come
it.
with
I mean,
him?
I think they're on Mandalore. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up staying on Mandalore the most of the rest of the season.
Well,
I don't know.
okay, question. What do you think? I mean, what do you think could happen now? I mean, like,
I don't know. Maybe they find some leftover Mandalorians who've been living there all along. I mean, I don't know. I haven't even seen any of like the teasers or trailers for the season on purpose, just because I'd rather be
I haven't
blind.
either. Yeah,
And
not really.
so I'm I have no idea. I have no maybe the what is it, the Empire at this point? Yeah, maybe the Empire comes to Mandalore to try to take it or mine it. Maybe they're already on it. I don't know. I mean, like, there's a million different ways they could go, I feel like. And part of that's exciting and and part of that's maybe worrying or something. I don't know. Or like,
Well, we know Moff Gideon's out there, right? He was prominent at the beginning or at the very end of season 1. He was pretty prominent through season 2. We know he's going to come back in season 3, I think, at some point. So we know the Empire's out there. The pirates are out there from that last episode, the first episode. And I wouldn't be surprised if like the Empire hires the pirates or something, like they're in cahoots with each other or something, like, and they go to Mandalore. I can see all that.
yeah, exactly.
But I like the mythology building and I like the idea of the beast. And I like that we're getting some of the Mandalorian just overall backstory. I think that's super fun and stuff.
I agree.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. But I just don't know exactly where it's going to end. And also, this is like I think one of the episodes where it ended like I don't know. Typically, the episodes are kind of contained, right? And they end on a way that's like we kind of completed the mission of the episode.
Yeah.
This one kind of ended like they're like Bo-Katan's kind of they're both like caught off guard, right? They just survived and like we end in a place where like oh it's kind of a cliffhanger kind of area.
You're right. I mean, that definitely feels like, and that feels like this season's probably going to be more of that, right? I mean, the season has a more, at least that's what this episode makes me feel like. The fact that we already got to Mandalore, we're already in the mines, we already bathed. It feels like that feels different in an exciting way to me for Mandalorian, because I mean, I'm more of a fan of serialized, like continuous storytelling rather than anthological. And so, yeah, I think that's probably why I like this episode too, because it's like, okay, like, next episode will essentially pick up minutes after this one ended, and that's exciting.
That's the hope. I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to the most, which I did this with season 1 and season 2, is as we get more and more episodes in, like binging all of them back to back to back, which I've typically done that like midway through the season, and then at the very end to kind of like I don't know, just watch like one giant movie and just kind of see how it feels as one piece. I do think the show would have benefited greatly releasing both these episodes at the same time.
I agree. Or just made it one hour-long episode where the first part's shorter. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I think this was what episode 1 should have been in terms of just like getting people ready for what this season's going to be. Because at this point, episode 1 just feels like a prequel episode to the season almost. You know what I mean? Like, very little at all relevant. I mean, I'm sure that character will come back, and so I'm sure, what's his name's character will come back. I'm blanking on his name.
The pirates or the
Well, him and the rock guy from Rocky.
Carl Weathers. Yeah.
Carl Weathers, yeah.
Grief. His name's
Grief.
Grief, I think.
Creed.
Grief? His name's Creed and it's Rocky.
Yeah,
but I think his
exactly.
name is
Yeah.
Grief.
I don't know, one of those.
Grief.
So yeah, no, yeah, we'll see how this. We'll see what's going on. And this episode definitely got me more interested in just the season in general. This actually makes me want, like I told you at the end of the episode, I think last week, like I'm not just on pins and needles ready for the next episode. I'm like, okay, but this one I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm ready to see what happens next. That's better.
Good.
That's much better.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, again, I am always sad when every episode ends, even if I'm like having issues with it. So I'm like, God dang, like I have to wait a whole week now. So it is still one of my favorite things to watch ever. Last bit of news here, Star Wars world, is like there's been reports now leading up to the Star Wars Celebration. We talked a little bit last week about Celebration. More news this week. Apparently, Kevin Feige, his Star Wars movie has been canceled. And
Patty Jenkins is as well, right? Shelved.
Yeah, that one's definitely been kind of like, I don't know, on the rocks. I think there were some reports about it being canceled, but this is the first time we've heard Feige's like being canceled, which is pretty wild. He's like the most successful, which makes me kind of wonder too about like, okay, Marvel is clearly shaky at the moment, and they're like, you can't go do Star Wars.
It may have been his decision. You know what I mean?
It may have been
saying,
his decision.
Hey, I need to focus with Marvel right now. Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like Marvel and Star Wars are streamlining a little bit their slates. Like they're at least like that's what like the rumors somewhat have been. At least that's been on the Marvel side. Like the rumors have been like about a lot of the reception to some of these recent projects have changed some of their plans for the future, right?
Yeah.
And I think Marvel's only recently gotten to this place where they've recently kind of fallen out of favor with the public, and Star Wars has been there. You know what I mean? Star Wars streamlined a lot after The Last Jedi, right? And like I think even after Kenobi, like in some of these like real shows that were received a lot pretty poorly, they've changed some things going forward. And then so yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't worry me really. That doesn't bother me. I mean, I think Kevin Feige's great at what he does, but is what he does, would that work in the Star Wars universe? I don't know, maybe, but like I guess like I'm a fan of good storytelling, and I'm a big fan of good Star Wars storytelling, and so I think getting people in, like, I mean, I think having the people that are at the helm, like the Dave Filoni's and to some extent, what can I pronounce? Favreau. The more singular hands that some of these things to be in, like it seems to benefit the IP, right? Like the more stuff that Feige's directly involved with in Marvel, those tend to end up being better. And so I'm just, that doesn't bother me too much. To the extent that like Patty Jenkins, I mean, Wonder Woman 1 was fine. Wonder Woman 2 is not, you know what I mean? And so like, I mean, Kevin makes great Marvel movies, but honestly, Marvel hasn't been making that great of movies either. So like, a Kevin Feige movie doesn't feel the same as it did in 2018 right now. You know what I mean?
True.
And so maybe that's part of it too. It's just like neither of those projects were just lighting me up. I also saw, which I'm assuming we're going to mention, that Taika Waititi is now apparently looking to star in his own trilogy that he's been, that we've known he got a while back, right?
Yeah,
and now he's going to star in it, which is
not even sure trilogy, just his first movie.
Okay.
But
yeah,
I mean, he does play IG-11. And
sure
Mandalorian
that character.
No, I don't think so either. But honestly, hearing that worries me a little bit, because I'm like, I don't want a Korg in Star Wars. Like I just imagine it not being a serious character, because he doesn't play serious characters.
Exactly. And so maybe if it's like for a kids movie, like maybe there's a version of like, hey, this is like directly for kids. Like this is not an adult Star Wars movie. This is a kids one or family movie. Maybe there's a version of that could work well.
I don't know.
That's not a kind of Star Wars movie I'm going to be dying to see either. right? So
No, I mean, I would have, I would have been very curious 2 years ago, but I think again, this man made Jojo Rabbit, and even though I don't agree with all the choices, I do love Thor Ragnarok, but I don't love Thor Love and Thunder.
mm-mm.
And
And he apparently had the most freedom there. Yeah, it's like that's what you want.
Yeah.
You worry for a Star Wars Love and Thunder, and that.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, like he did direct, I believe, the finale of Mando season 1. I believe he did.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, but it does feel like that stuff is so heavily produced that directing is a lot different. I mean, he had probably very little.
It's more like
right?
Favreau and Filoni are over your shoulder, and everyone's there helping. Yeah, it is much different. Don't get me wrong, but I just, I don't know. Could he do a good job? Absolutely, he could. He's proven that he's a great director if he, and with the right story. But I almost wouldn't be surprised though if his movie also gets next. That's the problem with Star Wars, is that even though they're having great success with like Mandalorian ratings wise and or critically, I mean I still don't think it's done well like ratings wise. They've had success in the last year with those. Boba Fett was mixed. I'm sure it may have done well Disney Plus. I don't know. But I feel like Star Wars is this weird place. Like the sequel trilogy really kind of fucked them over, and that reception of that Mando's, having the same time as the sequel trilogy was ending, and I think it really obviously brought Star Wars back in a big way, but like also different. And I'm very curious what they do on the movie front. I almost think like maybe Star Wars. I mean, I want to see a movie. I want to see Star Wars in the theaters. I do, and like I think there's a lot of money just sitting there where they could just probably put the same budget as a TV show. You know what I mean? Like, and recoup some money back. Like it'll make $1 billion. Make it like 700 million for that year's profit. Net profit for the company pretty easily if they're doing it right. But I just don't know. I mean, like,
it's tough. This is one of the sucky things about having like Star Wars, such an exciting, like endless possibility type IP with a company that plays it as safe as Disney does with everything that they own. They're going to skew towards what is like bankable rather than what is, versus like a high risk, high reward type thing. And I do feel like, I mean, I agree. I think like the sequel trilogy gave Star Wars IP a wound that it may never overcome. And that is, point. I mean,
it could I'll say.
It could if they could do the right things with it. But at this point, I don't, because here's the problem. They keep wanting to hang on to the profitable things that were profitable about those things. And like, what I think Star Wars honestly needs is a giant fucking blank slate. Like they just need to like give us new characters, jump forward 500 years where no one that we know is alive anymore, or has their historical figures, not anyone that's like around presently. Show us what the Force and what the Jedi and what the dark side have evolved into after 500 more years of progress and all that kind of stuff, and give us brand new characters and stuff that still feel like Star Wars, but are just completely new. And they won't do that because that's risky, because they can't bring Luke and Leia and AI generated Luke with them and like make everyone's heads pop off, even though it tells a shitty, boring story. You know what I mean? Like that's the part where that to me is where the most frustrating thing about Disney owned Star Wars is that it's like, you guys, you hug your wallets too close to ever take a big enough risk to actually do something like spectacular with this. And maybe you will, maybe you'll find a way to like, maybe you'll fumble it so much there won't be enough profitability left in the IP that you'll just have to take a risk with it. Or maybe I feel this is very unlikely. Maybe they'll find a way to still like, tell interesting stories, which they do with Andor, but still, even with Andor, it has this like taint right to it of like, it's still a part of this damaged IP. Like the IP just feels, especially when your problems all happen in like the future tense. Like I love Andor, but I can't help escaping the disappointing future that all of this grows into. You know what I mean? It's like watching Game of Thrones again. I can't watch Game of Thrones 1, 2, 3 seasons 1 through 4, even though they're some of the best things that have ever been on TV. they feel so hollow because everything that they're building towards is just falls so flat on its fucking face. It's just I can't care. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, even with this Mandalorian stuff, it's cool, but it happens before the bullshit. And so it's not as cool as it would be as if it was something completely new long after all this. You know what I'm saying? And like, it's always going to be limping, I guess, to me in terms of that until they either find a way to retcon things in a way that doesn't feel shitty, that doesn't just feel like, you know, cheap and done like, you know, done for profit rather than done for like, oh, here's a way to like really honor the fans and bring the universe back together.
It'd be
or,
wild
like I said,
if they did the world between worlds and like time traveled and retconned the sequel trilogy and gave us another one with like CG Luke and stuff. But
and
the problem is there's a
version of that sucks too, right? There's a version that they do that and they just blow it even more, and they blow the IP even more, and like the IP has even less value. And maybe that's a good thing for the IP. Maybe the best version of this is like it's sinking to the lows of like anyone can do a Star Wars, and then finally someone that like has a cool idea does it, and that, you know, like, that takes precedence. I don't know. It is just that it's the post sequel, you know, Star Wars universe is just it's got a shadow over it, you know. It's got a wound, it's bleeding, and it's like sometimes I feel like Disney wants to pretend like, I don't know. I can't figure out what Disney's doing about it. They can tell there's a problem, right? They're very aware of the problem, but it doesn't feel like they can do what's necessary narratively to fix it without upsetting their you know, the stockholders who they are owned by, you know what I mean? And so it does feel a little bit like I can only get so excited about Star Wars, and that kind of sucks.
Well, two small things and we'll wrap this up. I think one, we do got to remember that the prequel trilogy was very frowned upon. People universally love Revenge of the Sith. I think even hardcore OG fans for the most part. But even then, like the prequel trilogy has only felt like it's been like accepted since the sequel trilogy. Our generation has grown up. We grew up with those Star Wars. The sequel trilogy come out, and like we have that to complain about, right? So I think to say that Star Wars could never come back in the zeitgeist, like Force Awakens was a huge movie. It's still like the top 5 highest grossing of all time, or top 6, and you make, you know, almost $2 billion or right at $2 billion. It's a pretty good achievement. I think it's the highest film domestically ever in the US still, with like $900 million, which is a good step above the next Avatar. I think it's like 750 or something. So like USA loves Star Wars. USA loves Star Wars. So like we got to remember that too. And then the other thing I'm going to say is like, you're right. I think the universe needs to jump ahead 500 years in the future, and that is a big stain for me too. Is like knowing that these characters, that even if when Luke and them pop up, that we know the trajectory they're going and the choices that they make now, and like it kind of sours you a little bit. It's so cool seeing Luke fight like how we always imagine him to at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian. But there's always that's always going to be there, always, that, you know, until they fix it. One thing that Filoni and Favreau has come out and said, this last thing I'll talk about, is they've asked about, you know, the filling in these 40 years and like having characters mix with some of the other characters in the universe, like Luke, Han, and Leia, as they approach the sequel trilogy timeline. And Filoni kind of said, like, look, the galaxy is very big, even though it doesn't feel that way at all to me, based on their projects. But the galaxy is very big, is his point. And he said, like, we can tell stories and have these other big, you know, galactic events happening separate at the same time as Luke and Han and Leia are doing their things, which is totally valid. But it still feels, because, you know, it's like Ahsoka's that, you know, Yoda says, like, you know, you're the last Jedi, and like, well, what's a Jedi? Because Ahsoka's out there, and fucking your baby Yoda's being, you know, like, there's a lot happening in the universe. So
yeah,
I'm not a fan of that explanation. Like, I think the best version of like it's weird knowing Thrawn's out there and Ahsoka and Mando are fixing to take care of him, I think, and Ezra Bridger, and Luke and Han and Leia are also doing something. Like, the universe doesn't feel that big to me to like make that claim.
Yeah, and I saw an interview with Favreau and Filoni recently, and they were talking about, I think the question was, do you think your projects can do for the sequels what like the Clone Wars did
Right.
prequels. And they were basically like, yeah, of course it can. And I actually don't know if I agree, because the prequels had different problems than the sequels, right? Like the prequels had amazing ideas, really cool world building, and some pretty poor dialogue between the main cast, and some questionable acting sometimes, right? Like that was kind of like, and then like the plot of the movies, like I, there's some issues in the pacing with, especially with like episode 2 and even a little bit in episode 3, right? Like there's just some like dead like moments in terms of just pace and like energy and stuff.
Episode 2 is not great.
None of those things expand beyond the movies they're in, right? Those are problems with the execution of the ideas that are in the movies. They don't taint the ideas. They don't and like it's like Anakin delivering a line about you complete whatever he's saying to Padme in those like scenes that are just kind of like weird and don't work. Yeah. It doesn't affect the universe at all. That just affects that scene, right? Like that scene sucks because of this. The universe goes on, no problems. That's not the problems of the sequels.
Versus Palpatine returns somehow.
Yes, versus in The Last Jedi, the whole plot is around tracking people through hyperspace, which has been around all the time. Like these are like plot, world-breaking, plot stupidly stupid problems. Like these are problems where you broke the universe in some ways because you were just didn't care, I guess. You just like, we can do whatever we want in Star Wars. There are no rules in Star Wars. Whereas like George came from this place of, no, there's a very strict set of rules and everything, it runs like according to like logic in all of these ways. And like, yeah, the dialogue was weird and the acting was a little weird. And like the plot of the movies was not as good as it should have been, but like everything else about it was amazing and cool and exciting. And like, that's the opposite of the problem of these movies. In fact, there's a lot of things about The Last Jedi that work really well. And a lot of that is the execution of the filmmaking, the shot design, like are some of the best that Star Wars has ever had. The problem is all the ideas hurt the universe. And I think that's where it's just like, I don't know, guys. I don't know, Filoni. I don't know, Favreau. I don't know if you guys can fix these problems, because these are like structural problems to the world and lore, not execution problems.
Well, I don't know if that. I don't think they're like that's their mission. I think that they don't want to just like.
I do feel like
I don't think. I mean, we did get hints of like Snoke's tube and stuff in season 2, those kind of things, right? But I think it's more of like a, hey, we're going to tell our story, and like if we can work in smaller things, sure. But I don't think that's their objective, because I think that was more just like we're trying to give hope to some of the people who feel like how we're feeling right now about the sequel trilogy and just the state of the universe. That's an easy comment to make as an interview, as someone's interviewing you, to like not snuff out the fire, so to speak. Like you're just like, oh yeah, we could do that if we wanted to. Like we had the ability to do that.
I mean, we'll see. I do feel like that's the only, like if we look at what is Disney doing about the Star Wars problem, this is the only thing I see that they're doing right now. You know what I mean? Like, you mean
like in terms of like what? I don't
well, they're not. We don't know of any. Maybe they are. I'm sure they are behind the scenes, but they're not. The forefront of Disney's output right now is about filling in all these gaps between movies. So there's nothing. We're not hearing any news about the new trilogies or the new movies. Like that's all, in theory, years away still. Even the announcements. You know what I mean? And so I think
they're filling it out in terms of the things that are successful, not like actually plot making. Andor has nothing to do with the sequel trilogy. Obi-Wan Kenobi has nothing to do with the
same
trilogy.
Kind of thing, though. I mean, those are taking place in between the prequels and the sequels, and they're just filling out stuff there to like.
Well, they're filling things out that they know that people enjoy these time periods of the universe and these characters, and/or Obi-Wan Kenobi. Sure. Like they're the safe bets, and like obviously they're whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure,
no one's making a show that's like Clone Wars, where they're like trying to fill in actually the plot that happened. But we still don't know the stuff that happened between Luke, Han, and Leia between Return of the Jedi.
But
and
I
the
assume that's a lot. I mean, how is the story of Ezra Miller and Ahsoka going to take place with not having crossed paths with Luke at some point during his I mean, I fully expect by the time we get done with all of these Filoni slated shows and these Favreau shows, we will have basically seen Luke's downfall that takes place before the Force
I
Awakens.
honestly hope so, because like I think it's weird. I think it's weird. Hey, I hope that I hope Luke gets his own TV show and they just deep fake the hell out of him. It's like, and it's perfect acting.
It would be horrible. It
No,
can't
so
be. It never will be.
Well,
It'll never be as good as a real person ever.
Well, that's not true. We're going to get there eventually. It's going to happen. It has to happen at some point.
We'll see.
Maybe not in our lifetime.
I think there will always be a market for real people, even if AI can't replicate it.
I'm not saying there won't be. I'm just saying that the time is coming eventually.
Either way, I guess my point of saying is that like Star Wars, the only feat I see them putting forward right now is that kind of theory of, well, let's just fill in all the blanks and like make it so people will like it again. And maybe that is a more financially safe strategy because you have an example of that working with the Clone Wars, right? Now, I think, again, theoretically, I think they're not. I think at one point of logic that makes sense. At the same time, like we said, the problems with the sequels and the prequels are very different, and I don't think you can just apply the same method and get the same results. And so that's why by the end, I think even if we do get to see Luke's downfall through these Ahsoka show or maybe the Ezra Miller show that happens off because of that one, like whatever, if we see all that, while that may be all well and good, it still can't fix the core issues. And so
I agree.
I think I'm going to watch it. I'm going to consume it. I'm going to critique it and talk about it, but I'm ready to see the next giant leap forward. I mean, I'm ready to see Disney take risks in Star Wars again.
Me too.
And so,
I mean, will I watch The Acolyte? Sure. But I don't care about the Sith starting because I know where it's all going to end up. And,
and that one's at least a little bit more interesting because it's so far removed from the other ones that like it kind of plays in its own universe. But again, you can only get so excited about prequel things for me. I mean, there's still this element of like, but it's still...
I agree.
Still not current day in like our thinking of like what's currently going on in the universe. So
I agree. The best path forward is charting it could be a whole new galaxy, and like and lightsaber like objects. You know what I'm saying?
And if we need a plot where it like we find a big reset button for the universe, maybe that's what Ezra does and the wills and all that kind of shit. Or possible. If we need or I mean, I think the easier version is you jump 500 years and you just start telling new interesting stories with light references to the past.
We use Baby Yoda. You have Baby Yoda come in, but he's an adult Mandalorian. Like you can have that one character that connects from 500 years previously, but a whole new other cast of characters that support. Like he don't have to be the main character. He can be a supporting character, like a cool bounty hunter guy that comes in and helps the main heroes every now and then or something. It's totally doable. And that's why but will they do it? Daniel, how can listeners write into us?
Listeners, you can write into bit.ly/241mail. Let us know what you thought of the second episode of Mandalorian Season 3 and how you feel about Star Wars in general right now. Are you eating it up? Are you just ready for the Filoni and Favreau fixer series where they just fix all the problems of the people
That's their name
should have been
fixer
in charge? Or are you a little more burnt out? I think, it is interesting that, Disney has two of the biggest IPs in the world, and they both relatively recently acquired, and both are, well, of course, Marvel was on top of the world and has built a mountain that maybe has never been built before. They're both a little bit in, treading in choppy waters right now. And, that's just, it'll be really interesting to see, a company as big as Disney that cannot fail, what will they be doing with these and how will they be proceeding with these? So write into us, bit.ly/241mail with your thoughts.
I think Marvel is treading in choppy water. I think Star Wars is swimming in choppy water. They have been for a while.
Again, it's interesting because I almost feel like Star Wars is a little beyond Marvel in the process. They spent some years they had fallen heavily out of the public eye and had to rebuild out of almost like a very low opinion of them kind of from everyone. Like they lost all the fans by the end. It kind of felt like by the time Last Jedi came out, no one liked them anymore. Like even the people that were fans or weren't fans of The Last Jedi, they all agreed this sucks. You know what I mean? And so
they've had different cycles. The universe stopped in the mid 80s, picked back up in the late 90s. People were pretty disenfranchised, like the older group from the prequels. Like people just probably didn't like them very much. We did, different story. Another 15 years goes by, and then we have, a pretty big blockbuster, and it's back in the zeitgeist. And I mean, it's had a different thing. Marvel hasn't fallen yet. Everything will eventually, and they haven't fallen as far as Star Wars has in the past.
No, they haven't.
But it could happen. Maybe we're hoping that it doesn't. And if you can't up our bit, you can always write us in the comment section below. Again, youtube.com/24 Studios. The best place to consume the content. Daniel, next week we are talking the season overview of The Last of Us. And then, of course, we'll keep covering The Mandalorian. We have Shazam! Fury of the Gods around the corner and a lot of other cool things that everyone cares about. So, Daniel, thank you for talking, of course. I'm glad we got to do this. I'm looking forward to more Mandalorian. My name is Donovan Thompson.
I am Daniel Wingfield.
And we have spoken.